He was told he was a safety risk in the sky. Welcome to Freedom Alive. Former First Officer Chris Gates has been a pilot for more than 36 years. His record displays thousands of unblemished flight hours and earned Military Instructor of the Year in the Navy. But when the COVID shot surfaced, suddenly Chris was a safety risk. Well, he joins us to share his story and how he's fighting back. I'm thankful to again be joined by my friend and co-host, Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel. And Matt, it's unbelievable that Liberty Counsel is still dealing with legal cases defending them regarding the COVID shots. Do you think this will ever end?
Well, I think it'll still go on for some time. And, you know, these mandates came out in 2021. And United Airlines and other airlines, American, they all mandated these pilots and their attendants and all the different workers to get the COVID shot. And they did not respect their religious convictions. Mm-hmm. And Chris is a tragedy of one of those particular situations, along with many others that Liberty Counsel represents.
Thank you. Thank you so much for fighting back on behalf of so many. We cannot wait to bring this story to you, but Liberty Counsel's Freedom Alert is next.
Christian group denied due to religious message. Liberty Counsel appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals against the City of Seattle on behalf of Christian organizers for a grassroots revival event called May Day USA. The city unlawfully denied the organizers a permit to peaceably assemble at a traditional downtown location due to its religious message. Instead, the city moved them to a park in a predominantly LGBTQ community. Violent attacks were made toward the group. The plaintiffs have asked for a permanent injunction restraining the city from continuing its unlawful permitting process that violates free speech rights, religious exercise, and peaceable assembly, as well as equal protection. They must also grant them equal access to Seattle's streets and traditional public fora. The city's unconstitutional permitting scheme cannot withstand the First Amendment and causes significant harm.
Up next, Matt's interview with Chris Gates.
I'm pleased to be joined with a very special guest, Chris Gates, who is a former pilot first officer for United Airlines and a client of Liberty Counsel's. Welcome to Freedom Alive, Chris.
Good morning, Matt. Happy to be here. Excited, humbled to be here, and a little nervous speaking with Matt Staver live on Freedom Alive TV.
Well, don't be nervous. It's just me. And so thank you for joining us, Chris. It's an honor for Liberty Counsel and for me to stand beside you in this critically important case. For those viewers, we want to go to some background about who you are, but Liberty Counsel has a lawsuit against United Airlines with regards to violating Title VII. Title VII requires an employer to engage in an interactive process with an employee to try to work out a reasonable accommodation when you have a religious objection or conviction that conflicts with an employment practice or policy. In this case, it was the COVID-19 shot that came out of 2021. We'll get to that. We'll talk about how that came about. But before we do that, let's go back before you were a United Airlines pilot, Chris. Take us back to the time when you were a naval aviator.
Yes, sir. I graduated from college back in 1986. Shortly thereafter, joined the Navy, was accepted to their aviation program. Went through a program that was called Aviation Officers Candidate School down in Pensacola, 14. It was a 14-week boot camp with Marine Corps drill instructors. I think that program has been moved north since then. And from there, from graduation, went to the training environment, flew 3 different types of airplanes for the Navy. After that, received my wings, which was, the sign of successful completion of the aviation training program, and went and flew out in the fleet. Flew F-18s for 6.5 years. Total time in the Navy, active duty in aviation, was just over 10 years. It went by fast. but it was filled with a lot of excitement, a lot of challenges, and a lot of excitements.
So you were flying F-18s. You were flying some pretty fast jets.
Back in the day, they were just coming off the assembly lines for the first time, being introduced into the fleet. They were replacing the aging A7 Corsairs at the time. So to be selected to fly one of those was a great privilege.
Now, you also became a trainer, or you were an instructor. You received some awards for your Navy aviation skills.
Yes, sir. Before I was actually selected to fly F-18s, they chose me to be what was called a service graduate right after earning my wings. Service graduate, you went back and taught new pilots, brand new people out of whether it was the Academy, AOCS, or ROTCs, and teaching them how to fly jets. So I was selected to do that tour for 2 years in Pensacola, received high time awards, instructor of the quarters, instructor of the years. It was, again, a great privilege to train young aviators and hopefully give them the tools they need to be successful down the road.
And then you, after you left the Navy, after 10 years of service as a Navy aviator that were highly decorated with some of these awards that you received, you became an airline pilot, and eventually you became a pilot for United Airlines, and you worked there for, what, 25 years or so?
Yes, sir. Just 3 days short of 25 years was my time at United. And in that time, again, flew 2 different types of airplanes. And with my background in instructing and evaluating the Navy, United asked me to be one of their instructor evaluators as well. But that was also a great honor to, again, give them the tools, new pilots, the tools they needed to be successful flying passengers and multi-million-dollar airplanes out for real. It's a challenge, but you have to be honest because the ramifications of not doing a good job or evaluating, sometimes tough, can be a bad deal at the end of the day.
Yeah, so you have to make hard decisions sometime where you see somebody in the training process that may not be the right person to sit in that pilot in command seat or up in the cockpit. What kind of aircraft did you fly for United before we get to the issue of 2021?
Yeah, originally was hired in December '96. I was assigned to the 727, Boeing 727, which is an older airplane, no longer really flying for commercial airliners in the United States. And then was accepted to fly the Airbus. And that's where I spent most of my time. And after flying the Airbus, they asked me to be an instructor. And when they ask you to be an instructor and evaluator, they also train you as a captain. And that's one of the FAA rules. We talk about safety a lot and what safety is supposed to do and set as a gold standard moving forward. But we as instructor evaluators, no matter where we are in the training center, we train as captains, we get rated as captains, but when we go fly the line afterwards, we're flying in the right seat, first officer seat, pilot supporting the captains. And I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, sure does. Now, so 2020 comes along. You've been flying now for over 20 years. So 2020 comes along, COVID happens, and then in the fall of 2021, there's this COVID-19 shot mandate, and United now imposes that on you and other employees in United. When that happened, tell us what your first response was, and how did you think through this process that you chose, for religious reasons, not to get the COVID shot?
Well, the timeline, you know, I don't know if you would call it short or not short, but the messaging wasn't very clear. What needed to be done, how it needed to be done, what methods you had to go through, or what processes you had to use to communicate your requests. So when the final messages came out that, hey, we're going to mandate this, and the initial discussion and message from the CEO was this is, again, a safety issue. Okay. Prior to this, as instructor evaluators and all pilots, we were key employees mandated to go to work. which, if you remember, prior to that, it was essential employees were the only ones that could travel to and from work and have a, what do you want to call it, a permission slip if you ever got stopped by police that you were going to work and you were essential. Shortly after that, yeah, we got the message. It was going to be mandated. The messaging from United management and even from our unions was kind of was jumbled.
So when you looked into this matter, you ultimately filed a religious exemption to be exempted, in part because you, being a devout Roman Catholic, you saw that these particular shots, all of them, had some connection with aborted fetal cell lines, and like many people, did not want to put something in your body that would support anything that's anywhere close to abortion. So you asked for religious accommodation. What happened?
Well, and I did ask for the religious accommodation based on the experimental use of the aborted fetal cell tissues and its association with the experimental drugs. That's, again, as a baptized Catholic, life begins at conception. And so that was something I could not consciously perform. So I did request the initial reasonable accommodation due to religious reasons. And that was not, it wasn't accepted. It had a little issue with computers. I did send some messaging through normal emails with United and United HR. And they replied with a link to say, well, if you'd like to submit your reasonable accommodation, here's a link, please submit it here. So I did submit it. And at that point, it was beyond United's the deadline date, a couple days, and 3 days after they received it, they denied it based on date, not on merit.
Yeah, so listen to this, you know, for those that are watching this. United Airlines all of a sudden comes up with this mandate. You have to get the COVID shot, giving you a very short window of time. If you've got a religious objection, you need to file it by X amount of time. That's not permitted within the law. It's not permitted to say, well, if you don't file, even if you have a religious objection, but you don't meet our deadline as United, well, we're not going to consider it. But that's what United did. That's what United did to you. They set up an arbitrary date to get these in. It was confusing. And then when some of them came in just after the date, they just said, we're not going to look at it. That's a clear violation of federal law. You know, the United Airlines CEO at the time, Scott Kirby, he expressed public statements, and I'll mention some of them. He had apparent disdain for religious objections. At a company town hall, the CEO of United at the time, Kirby, declared that very few religious exemptions would be granted, and he warned, quote, any employee who all of a sudden decided, I'm really religious, close quote, would be, quote, putting their job on the line, close quote. So if you, in his view, decided that you're religious, you don't want to have this COVID shot, you're putting your job on the line. United amazingly did this to so many people. It is, Chris, hard to conceive.
Yes, sir, it is. And we look at the timeline, we're 4+ almost 5 years into this. I sit in front of you because the Liberty Council team accepted me as a client. I am very blessed with that. But when the Freedom Alive audience hopefully watches this, they should be understanding the thousands of other people that could be sitting here in front of you today. Yeah. Not just the thousands of United employees that are still damaged looking for some type of solution to the problem, but it's also other industries as well. And again, going back to being humbled sitting in front of you today, that's, again, people are looking at my face, but there's thousands out there that are still looking for resolution from this issue.
Chris, I think that's the heartbreaking thing. Right now, people are watching you, but you represent literally thousands within United alone, not the other industries, just United alone. There are thousands of people that have been treated just like you have within United. That's terrible. It's terrible. And you have a cumulative 36 years of aviation experience, 10 years in the Navy, decorated with awards in the Navy. Now 25 years, almost a couple of days shy, with United, training other people to fly United aircraft. Very concerned and very passionate about your work. And they don't allow you to have a religious accommodation because they won't even consider it. And here's the other thing, Chris, that's astounding. And we put this in the lawsuit that we filed on behalf of you and others like yourself. United has a lot of people that they do give exemptions to. So like the people that are bringing the food on the aircraft, if they don't get the COVID shot, they can bring the food on the aircraft. They're not getting the COVID shot. Other United cooperative agreements that they have with other airlines. And, you know, we as flyers, we see them all the time. Maybe a pilot come in and they're looking to fly and they fly in the jump seat. They're not necessarily United pilots. Or if they are United pilots, they might be with one of the express components of United that they contract with. They're not required to get the COVID shots. So they can literally sit there in the jump seat without a COVID shot. But you have to get the COVID shot. If you fly to a foreign country and the United or the other workers there don't need to get the COVID shot there in that nation, they don't need to get the COVID shot. But so there's all these exemptions. Why couldn't they exempt you? Why couldn't they even review your application?
Well, I can't speak for the leadership of United or the leader of United, but that's a hard one to answer. As a critical employee a year before, at the beginning, and now you're disposable. And I'm in a safety environment. The initial reason, as you stated from the CEO's comments, public comments, is that United was doing this for safety. The irony is, you know, the violation of FAA medical regulations.
Yeah.
And those regulations were established based on safety. So you have one irony right there that it doesn't make sense. And the other aspect of this is initially United said everybody was going to have to be given the shot. Then they went and divided the work groups into customer facing and non-customer facing. As a pilot, we're customer facing. But my main job was still in the training center, teaching pilots how to fly, and it was simulator based before they went out and flew the real airplane. I really wasn't customer facing. Is there an exemption there? Hey, Chris, you don't have to fly the line until this issue is resolved. There are many ways that this could have been easily remedied. Instead, we're going down the hard path now, or the more difficult path.
Yeah, and I think that's the critical thing. There's a lot of ways that they could have accommodated you and so many others that they didn't do. They didn't even bother to interact and engage with options about how they could accommodate you. We represent a United Airlines former worker who, like yourself, had the same kinds of objections and, like yourself, was terminated. She was and has always been a remote worker. She works in her home. She works in her home, Chris. And she will get a phone call that's routed to her from a customer that's wanting to book or rebook a United Airlines flight. She never goes into a place where she's facing customers. She's always working in her home. And they terminated her because they wouldn't give her an accommodation the same as you. And I also know, Chris, on this program, we interviewed an American Airlines pilot who, unlike you, he had the same kind of objection that you did, but not the same necessary level of encouragement or courage to really resist. And so he succumbed. He took the COVID shot. He landed in the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. 6 minutes after touchdown, they pulled up to the gate, and he had a heart attack. And fortunately for him, his life was saved. The emergency workers came immediately on board, gave him CPR. He's been attached to a lot of different kinds of machines. but he'll never be able to fly again, even if he wants to. And it is based on the doctor's opinions directly related to the COVID shot. So he unfortunately paid a terrible price for this. So I want to thank you and so many of your other United Airlines airlines workers, co-workers that are fighting for freedom and fighting for justice. Chris, when you got into this, after they told you that they're not going to accommodate you and they terminate you, I imagine you went through some soul searching at the time, some difficult times. That you were a pilot now for nearly 35, 36 years.
Yes, sir. Soul searching is a kind word. The mistake, I think, being in this profession, which is a high risk, high reward profession, is you become associated with, and your being becomes the pilot, not just the Navy pilot, invisible and bulletproof while you're flying that fast jet, but very similar when you're flying passengers around or teaching new crew member the skills they need to be successful. So there is a trade. There is a shift. There's a shift not only of the mind, but a shift of the heart. And who am I really? Where do I really belong? And sometimes those questions aren't answered quickly. We look for those answers. Sometimes they just don't come. And I hope we just don't miss the message when it does come of where we should be and what we should be doing to be, high work type of people or deliverable type people to help the people around us in their needs. And think of it that way.
Chris, it's really amazing. In 2020, early 2021 through most of 2020, you were considered a critical employee, an essential employee. You were required to go to work when the aircraft was not full. They were putting people in every other seat. You were there. We didn't know what we had gotten into with this COVID thing, but you were there flying every day. You were the heroes. So were the healthcare workers. Then all of a sudden, you go from heroes and essential, critically important workers to keep America running, keep the world moving, to actually being a target of derision and not respecting your core religious beliefs on which America was founded. It's an incredible turn. But I think, Chris, as you went through some, I know, dark days thinking of this as you were separated from United, you are alive, you're well. You're not like some of these other pilots that we've actually interviewed that don't have their health anymore, or even worse, that have died. And many of them have over this. We know many people. I know you know people in the industry that succumbed to the pressure. And Chris, you stood for your values. You stood for integrity. You stood for the Lord. And you're there for your granddaughter. And that, I think, transmitting to her and other people and the people that view this, there is no price that you can put on top of that. That's invaluable. So thank you for your courage, and thank you for your stand. And may God continue to bless, in this case, to give justice to you and to so many others. Chris, in the final moments that we have, is there anything on your heart you want to share with those who are watching? Any parting thoughts that you want to share?
Yep, two thoughts. Again, let's pray for our men and women that are out there protecting us today. Pray that they stay focused on their mission and they return home safely to us. Those are my brothers and sisters out there. The second part of this is, since being associated with Liberty Counsel and your team, I have experienced nothing but professional calm, cool, and confidence in the approach forward. Again, I can't thank you and what you built and the team supporting me. Like I said, I'm here, but there's thousands out there that could be sitting in this chair receiving this gift from Liberty Counsel right now. And so with that, I say thank you, and I hope we keep marching forward. Find a mission, find a message that resolves this issue and gets people back to where they belong professionally and in their, like you said, their hearts and their souls.
Well said. There are so many people like you. We're fighting continually for you and for others for justice, and not only in the airline industry, but in other industries, healthcare workers and others around the country. But I think one of the messages that have come through in your sincerity and your love for the Lord so clearly is don't succumb, don't put your beliefs, your core Christian, your core faith beliefs, don't jettison them. That is who you are. Don't let the world try to change that and erase it. There may be some dark days, some difficult times that you face, but God, with Him, all things are possible. It was dark for the Jewish people in Egypt, but God ultimately brought Moses and delivered them. And for you, you have stood. Your courage, what you are doing now, will echo through history. It won't be something that is not remembered. It'll echo through history, and it will, I believe, by God's grace, impact many others besides yourself. So thank you, Chris, for joining us on Freedom Alive. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, sir. I'm humbled to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, such an inspiring story, such an inspiring guest. So much injustice, so much hurt and pain. It brings back so many bad memories and so much bad behavior pushed aside so callously over a religious accommodation.
Well, what he described of being the hero, being an essentially critical worker to keep the airlines flying in 2020, 2021, from that to actually being terminated with no recourse at all because he had a religious accommodation when United was actually providing exemptions for so many others as well. Makes no sense. And it's like it's a 180 degree turnaround. It's the same thing that happened with healthcare workers. I remember in Maine and in New York, the healthcare workers at the beginning of 2021, for example, in Maine, the governor said that they were healthcare heroes. They were the heroes, and they were. Well, by the end of 2021, they were the zeros. They were forced out as well. So many people were hurt by these abusive, harmful mandates, and by COVID itself, by the COVID shots.
For those at home, it's our unique, distinct privilege and honor to bring you stories like this with Chris Gates and so many others to share the truth with you about so many issues that we face. And in closing, remember Isaiah 40, verse 31, which says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." Our freedom is a gift from our Creator. We must never forget that and always protect it. Join us here next time. You'll hear victories as well as ways you can stand up for your priceless freedom. Join us again for Freedom Alive.